BF dumped me on Valentine's after I gave him a pricey gift, then I found out he made out with his co-star and caught feelings behind my back. Valentine's Day ended in a way that still feels like a punch to the chest. The night started with hope, a carefully planned dinner, and a gift that took months of saving to afford. High-end wireless headphones, the kind he'd been eyeing for ages, wrapped in sleek packaging, sitting on the table between plates of homemade pasta. His apartment was small, cluttered with scripts and coffee mugs, but it felt like home after nearly a year together. The evening was supposed to be a milestone, a moment to celebrate us. Instead, it became the night everything fell apart. He barely looked at the headphones, his eyes darting to the floor, and then he said he needed to talk. The words that followed were cold and final. He wanted to end things. No warning, no real explanation, just a vague mention of needing to focus on himself. By the time the door closed behind him, the headphones were still on the table, unopened, and tears were streaming down my face as I sat in my car, staring at the dashboard, trying to understand what just happened. The days after Valentine's Day were a blur of confusion and pain. The breakup left a hollow feeling, like something vital had been ripped out and left behind. His apartment, the headphones, the dinner, every detail replayed in my head, searching for clues. He'd been distant for weeks, but he'd always blamed it on his schedule. Late rehearsals, early call times, the grind of trying to make it as an actor. He was part of a small indie web series, one that had a cult following online, and it demanded everything from him. Supporting him through it had been second nature. Driving him to set when his car broke down, staying up late to read lines, even helping him budget so he could afford headshots. The breakup felt like a betrayal of that effort. He'd said he needed to reevaluate and focus on his creative direction. But those words felt empty, like a script he hadn't rehearsed well. Sleep was impossible that first night, and by morning, the hurt was starting to mix with anger. Why hadn't he just been honest? What wasn't he saying? By the second day, curiosity took over. His vagueness gnawed at me, and the need to understand what happened pushed past the grief. His co-star, Nina, had always been a background figure in his stories. He'd mention her in passing, how she was easy to work with, how their chemistry carried scenes. It never raised red flags. Trust had been easy, he'd never given a reason not to. But something about the breakup, the way he avoided details, made her name stick in my mind. Scrolling through Instagram, the show's tagged stories popped up. One clip showed Nina laughing, holding a coffee cup, while someone off-camera teased her. The caption read, "Crazy how on-screen makeouts can get complicated off-screen." My stomach dropped. The words felt like a coded message, a hint at something more. It wasn't proof, but it was enough to make me question everything. Had she been the reason all along? The thought of them together, while he was still with me, turned the hollow feeling into something sharp and bitter. The Instagram story looped in my mind, each word of Nina's caption carving deeper into my doubts. A month ago, he'd come home from a rehearsal, tired but cheerful, talking about how well the scenes were coming together. He never mentioned anything unusual, just the usual complaints about long hours and picky directors. Now, that memory felt tainted. The need for answers grew stronger, pushing me to dig deeper. One of the minor cast members, Sarah, had always been friendly when we met at rap parties or casual hangouts. She wasn't close to him or Nina, but she'd been around enough to know the dynamics on set. Messaging her felt like a gamble, but the alternative, staying in the dark, was worse. Her response came after a long pause, hesitant but honest. A month ago, during a late rehearsal, he and Nina had practiced a kiss for a scene. It was supposed to be professional, just blocking for the camera. But Sarah said they kept going, long after the director had left, laughing and lingering in a way that felt too personal. The rest of the cast noticed, but no one said anything. Hearing it confirmed what the caption hinted at, and the betrayal cut deeper than the breakup itself. Confronting him was the next step, though part of me dreaded it. The phone felt heavy as I typed out the message, keeping it direct. I knew about the kiss with Nina, and I wanted the truth. His reply came faster than expected, no defensiveness, just a flat admission. The kiss happened, he said, but it was nothing serious, at first. Over time, though, he started feeling something for her. He called it developing feelings, as if it was some gradual, uncontrollable thing. When I asked why he never told me, his answer was weak. He didn't want to hurt me. The excuse felt like a slap. He'd had weeks to be honest, weeks to tell me he was crossing lines, but instead, he let me plan Valentine's Day, let me buy the headphones, let me believe we were fine. The truth wasn't just that he'd kissed her, it was that he'd hidden it, letting whatever was between them grow while I was still in his life. The realization made every moment we'd shared in the last month feel like a lie. The weight of his admission settled in, heavy and suffocating, like a storm cloud that wouldn't pass. Knowing he'd kissed Nina wasn't even the worst part. It was the deliberate silence, the choice to keep me in the dark while he let those feelings for her take root. Every memory of the past month was now suspect. The late-night texts he brushed off as work-related, the way he'd sometimes zone out when we were together, the excuses for why he couldn't meet up. I chalked it all up to his chaotic schedule, the demands of the web series, the stress of chasing his dream. Supporting him had been my default, even when it meant rearranging my own life. I'd spent hours helping him memorize lines, sitting through rough cuts of episodes, hyping him up when he doubted himself. I'd believed in his talent, in his drive, in us. Now, it was clear that while I was pouring everything into our relationship, he was slipping away, building something with Nina behind my back. The headphones, still sitting unopened in my car, felt like a symbol of my naivety, hundreds of dollars spent on someone who was already checking out. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was the hours, the effort, the trust I'd given so freely, all thrown away. I spent that night replaying every interaction, searching for signs I'd missed, wondering how I'd been so blind. Sleep didn't come, just a restless cycle of anger and hurt, each wave crashing harder than the last. Part of me wanted to scream at him, to demand a better explanation, but another part knew it wouldn't change anything. He'd made his choice, and it wasn't me. By the next morning, the anger had solidified into something colder, more focused. I started piecing together the timeline, cross-referencing his stories with what I now knew. The rehearsal kiss happened a month ago, but the feelings, he admitted to, didn't just appear overnight. There had to be more, conversations, moments, glances, that built up to it. Nina's Instagram story wasn't a one-off. It was a window into a dynamic that had been brewing for weeks, maybe longer. I went back to the show's social media, scrolling through older posts, looking for anything that might confirm my suspicions. There were photos of them together, nothing overtly romantic, but the frequency stood out. A behind-the-scenes shot of them laughing on set, a group photo where they stood a little too close, a video clip where she playfully nudged him while he grinned. Each post added another layer of doubt about his honesty. He'd always framed Nina as just a co-star, someone he worked well with, but the evidence suggested otherwise. I remembered a night in early January when he'd come over after a long day of filming, talking excitedly about a scene they'd nailed. He'd mentioned Nina's improvisations, how they'd made the moment feel real. At the time, I'd been proud of him, happy to see him so passionate. Now I wondered if that passion was for the scene or for her. The thought made my stomach twist. I also recalled smaller moments, times he'd check his phone and smile, then put it away quickly, or how he'd started mentioning Nina more often, always casually, but enough to notice in hindsight. The worst part was realizing how much I'd dismissed my own instincts. There had been a faint unease, a quiet voice questioning why he seemed distracted, but I'd ignored it, trusting him completely. That trust was gone now, replaced by a bitter clarity that he'd been living a double life, letting me play the supportive girlfriend while he explored something new with her. The days that followed were a struggle to keep moving forward while the hurt lingered like a bruise. Every detail I uncovered made it harder to let go of the questions. I stopped checking the show's social media, but the images were burned into my mind, Nina's laugh, his grin, the easy way they seemed to fit together. I started noticing things in my own life that reminded me of him. The coffee shop we used to go to, the playlist he'd made for me, even the headphones still sitting in my car. Each one was a small stab, a reminder of how deeply I'd let him into my world. I tried to distract myself with work, with friends, with anything that would fill the silence, but the betrayal kept resurfacing. It wasn't just that he'd kissed Nina or developed feelings for her, it was the way he'd let me believe everything was fine. He'd sat across from me at dinner, watched me hand him the gift, and said nothing about the truth he was hiding. That deception felt like a theft, of my time, my effort, my trust. I wondered how long he would have kept it up if I hadn't seen Nina's Instagram story. Would he have strung me along for weeks, months, while he figured out what he wanted with her? The thought made me feel small, like I'd been a placeholder in his life, someone to keep around until something better came along. I started questioning myself, wondering if I'd been too supportive, too accommodating, too blind to his flaws. Friends tried to help, telling me I deserved better, but their words didn't erase the ache. I wasn't ready to forgive him, and I wasn't sure I ever would be. All I could do was keep moving, one step at a time, trying to reclaim the pieces of myself I'd given to him. In the end, cutting him out was the only way to start healing. I blocked his number that night, deleted his messages, and removed every trace of him from my phone. It wasn't dramatic or satisfying, it was just necessary. The hurt didn't vanish, and the questions didn't stop, but blocking him gave me a small sense of control. I realized he'd never been fully honest, not just about Nina but about himself. He'd used the rehearsals, the show, his creative direction, as excuses to blur boundaries, to avoid accountability. That realization shifted something in me. I'd spent nearly a year believing in him, supporting his dreams, thinking we were building something together. But he'd been building something else, something I was never part of. The headphones, the dinner, the late nights helping him with lines, they were all part of a version of us that only existed in my head. Letting go of that version was painful, but it was also freeing. I started focusing on myself, on the things I'd put on hold for him. Work projects I'd neglected, hobbies I'd set aside, friends I hadn't seen enough. The pain was still there, sharp and raw, but it was mixed with a quiet determination to rebuild. He'd taken a lot from me, but he couldn't take my ability to move forward. I wasn't replaced because I wasn't enough, I was replaced because he wasn't honest. That truth, as hard as it was to accept, became the foundation for starting over.